again, it's a lifestyle. Flamenco is a lifestyle, and that's something that I have to express, that it's not just, it's a way of life, you know? And you live it 24/7.
In today's episode, I want to delve into the true meaning of what is the art of flamenco. And to get a qualified version or a qualified opinion, today's guest is Jose Moreno. Jose comes from a family of flamencos. He's a third generation flamenco, and definitely someone who I can say is qualified to give us the true meaning of flamenco. The term flamenco has been casually thrown around, I've noticed, and I think it's well worth the time to break it down and let everyone know what the true meaning of flamenco is. So welcome to the show, Jose.
Oh, thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's get right down into it.
Okay.
So so a lot of people throw around the term flamenco just very loosely nowadays, especially, and it's not everybody's fault. Some people are just uneducated. They weren't exposed to it. They weren't educated, and some people aren't to blame, and some people maybe intentionally overuse it too as well.
That's also,
but that's another story. But just let's get down to the basics. When somebody's referring to flamenco, what is flamenco?
So this can actually, this just one question can go on for a very long time.
This could be a long answer, but we'll try to give you like.
So I'm going to try to condense the many parts that I think, as my personal opinion, is flamenco. And just to give you a little bit of a history, the word flamenco, to my understanding, comes from the word felahmingu. That's one of the words that means like nomadic peasant or traveler or nomadic farmer. There's many terms to that. That's one way to believe where that word comes from. But at the same time, you have flamenco comes from, I would say, considered an oppressed art form that came through oppression, through suffering, through all this tragedy, by, unwillingly, but that's what happened. The history of it being over 500 years old, not what is done now, but the history of it, the origins of it, I believe, were during the Inquisition, when, Spain, the Queen wanted, unified Spain, cleanse Spain, and the church and everything got in the way, I would say, as part of a government, basically wanted everybody to convert. So, you had that whole era of Spain which wasn't very nice, I would say.
Right.
And, that is something we can dive into on its own. But just to make it quick, let's say there was a lot of cultures. Spain was a country that had a lot of ports, had a lot of trade, had a lot of commerce in term. And Europe is very old. It had a lot of things happening, especially in the ports town. Right before, so it was basically a big gateway to cross the Atlantic, and kind of see the new oceans, the new this, just like, what happened with, that we know, 1492. But basically, during that era and the Inquisition, cultures, four main cultures that I like to always say, including one of them I'm going to include is going to be the Spanish Andalusian, or the Southern Spanish. You have your Muslim culture, which was part of Spain for over 800 years. You have your Sephardic Jew, which was also there for a very long time and continues to. And you have your Spanish Gypsy or Gitano. Gitano, specifically, that I know of, 16 tribes left North India, specifically the Punjab region, left and spread out through Europe. One of those tribes was called the Palos tribe and ended up in the south of Spain, and called Los Gitanos, or Gitanos Calo. Okay, that's a specific tribe name and a specific people, And then you have those cultures, those blending cultures, each of them bringing their own heritage. In India, you have all that coming from the Gitano, like over 1,000 years of heritage, over 1,000, Then you have your Sephardic Jew, all the music, you have the Muslim, all the music, all the heritage, and all that came with it. And now you have this problem happening in Spain. Everybody's together. They have to flee. So they flee south, mostly any way they can. But they flee south. Not everybody can get out at the same time. This is happening. You're basically getting tortured if you don't convert, this. And so what's going on is you have this turmoil. And now you have oppression. Obviously, you have all these things happening. So now you have they create an underground where people were still practicing their own religion underground, basically. That's happened in many times in history. And one of them was also in caves and hiding. You're hiding from the actual, like, government. So now you have to communicate. You have these different cultures that don't communicate with each other, but they find what I like to call as a universal language, which is called music. And the Thai music, the soul part of each. That's why flamenco to me is very soulful. Flamenco to me is very soulful in the fact that it comes from a deep place. A deep place could be of suffering, could be of dealing. I mean, while this is happening, life's still going on. People get sick, people die, people fall in love, people. So it's still going on. It's not just like life stops and we all do this one thing. So you talk about everything, and in flamenco, there to me in its essence was singing, and then you have the dance, the form of expression, and then you have everybody's instrument in that way. That's why I think flamenco is so diverse, in the sense that we can fuse and open up to different parts of the world, because it's open to many instruments. But at the same time, it's this combination, this melting pot of people that are going through the same thing, and then they kind of feel with each other. Even we can't speak to each other, but we feel with each other the same feeling. So we fast forward, and now it's what it is today, where, of course, the flamenco to me has always been an evolutionary art form, has always been something that grows with the times, and hopefully always for the best. Sometimes we don't agree with certain changes, but so hopefully it grows, and the more we know, the more it'll grow into something that we expect it to be fruitful and with depth, for it to have a soul, because flamenco can't lose its soul. Where it comes from, you have to remember where this was a lament, was a cry of the town, was a cry of, like, for help, a cry of agony, a cry of also frustration, a cry of many things. And again, now the happy parts, hey, we're exploring, we're falling in love, all these things are, again, you find the lyrics kind of like the blues, to where you talk about real life, you talk about these things, and you express them. And to think right now that flamenco is, to me, one of the most richest music that I can understand, genres of music that I can understand, that's over 135 different styles, with branches going all over the place, and sub derivatives of those, and it's almost infinite, because at the end of the day, flamenco has its form of expression, and that can't be lost either. So we learn to express our ways, yes, in a form of expression, but knowing your boundaries or your standards that were set a long time ago. So I think that flamenco can grow more and more and more, and hopefully in the right direction.
Yeah. So now it's safe to say that flamenco can encompass all ends of the spectrum in terms of emotion, but originally it didn't start like that. Originally it started more from the hardships.
I think so. I believe so. I mean, again, I
More
wasn't
from the
there, but I believe
oppression.
that that's where it would come from. And again, it was also a working class. It's like you're going to work, you sing at work, and then those people sing with you. So, like, you had your miners, and you had your iron workers, you had your the different, there, and then you have in within the community of the gitanos, you have your basket weavers, you have your los canasteros, you have your los tratantes, los anticuarios. You also have different, everybody has its own life within that.
Right.
So it's part of the livelihood. Like, you're going to work, you singing, this, and that became its own form. Became its own tradition.
And that's one of the reasons they compare to the blues, because originally,
absolutely,
the same deal with people who were under oppression here in the United States.
Absolutely.
Would start making up verses and lyrics that they would sing in the cotton fields,
right.
and this and that. And
history has a way of repeating itself, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In different forms. So yes, we can all relate.
Just to recap a little bit, just what Jose said a little bit earlier, if you heard that, was that there's over 100 different palos or styles within flamenco. So there's even over 100 styles. And then from those styles, there's even smaller derivatives that come from each style. So there is, when you say flamenco, you could be talking about hundreds of different styles within flamenco. Now, kind of going down that avenue, when somebody goes to see a show, to technically call it a flamenco show, if you're advertising it as a flamenco show, one would be expecting to see at least a nice variation. You're not going to see all 100 styles, of
Obviously.
course, but
You have those, yeah.
maybe it's safe to say that there's about entablados or live settings. There's about 10 to 15 that are most common ones that you'll see,
maybe a little more, but
popularized.
You have your popular
Yeah,
styles, yeah, absolutely. You have your popular style where everybody's going to gravitate to. A lot of the styles that are mentioned within the 100 are people that really steady the form, and it's even hard to find some of those cantes. You cannot find them. You know what I mean? And now a lot of people are digging up stuff because they're like, wait a minute, like this cante got lost. You know what I mean? And you look up history and with flamenco, you look at books, and then sometimes they mention a cante. Well, what is that? What, you know, like, you know, el candil or this. Or these are dances that were done in 16 something, you know, 1700.
Right.
I mean, to its own thing, meaning like to kind of back that up, meaning a lot of the structure within flamenco came in the 1800s, what I believe, especially in the cante part with Siverio Franconetti and all these different singers that were popular at the time that were starting to give structure to a lot of the cantes and then the bailes as well later, you know what I mean? So not the singers, but the dancers themselves, you know. And this is, I mean, it's a history, it's a real big history lesson that I mean, it's super rich. So we, you know, that can be a whole other conversation. But I mean, at the same time, yes, they're in a tablao today, maybe, you know, a singer or maybe might know 50 to 60 styles in his head, just remembering, you know, where, you know, you can ask them, hey, sing me Seguiria, hey, sing me a Serrana, hey, sing me this, you know, Aliviana, sing me a Toná, sing me, you know, Caracoles, sing me, and they're going to know it because that's part about being a professional within your art form, within your idiom. So I think in order for me to be a flamenco professional, you should know your basics of all those palos, at least the ones that are used popularly, so when you go work, it doesn't catch you by surprise. It's kind of like, well, if you're a professor and you don't know you know how to do something, and then the student asks you, you know, you're not going to look kind of good doing it, you know. So you want to look professional, you want to look like that. Professional requires a certain amount of knowledge to be considered professor amongst your peers, you know. And I think that sometimes, you know, we can touch into that a little bit. Maybe some people get ahead of the train and don't really learn those and kind of get in front of the curve because, again, they're not educated in the fact of what is necessary, or, you know, they just want to go and do it, I guess, you know. And but I mean, I grew up with a formal training with my parents, and so it was very hard for me to be considered a professional before I actually got told, hey, yes, you're now a professional. I had to know all my dances. I had to know all this. I had to know what my father would sing in Malagueña, and I had to recognize what it was. It wasn't just, you know, hey, let's go do a dance that I learned a choreography at. No, I had to know what I was listening to. I had to know where everything was, and I had to get it fact checked, you know, you know, by teachers and you know. And then when I started studying more with other teachers other than my parents, I studied with Manolete, and I studied with Andres Marin, I studied with, you know, we co-worked and stuff with, I studied with Farruquito, I studied with, you know, a lot of Manuel Soler, you know, for Cajon. I studied with a lot of, and then a lot of friends that I have, Pansequito, this, and I mean, the majority, well, maybe, you know, Roberto Castellón, Pedro Cortés, you know, Mayra Maya, like, I mean, I could go down the list, you know, of people that I have learned from and have taught me all these amazing things. And I mean, I'm sure I'm forgetting people, and of course it's not on purpose, but to me, this has always been very important to learn from your peers, to learn from artists that know more as an experience, you know, because of just experience. They know more out of experience. It's not that because now, you know, if I'm 18 and I'm starting off, I haven't worked with people, and now I have someone that's, you know, 40 and has been around and worked with all the artists, I'm going to be like, oh, we're at the same level. No, we're not. You know, I have to learn. I have to, you know, I have to apprenticeship this a little bit, and then also have them understand that I want to learn that too. It's not like I know it already, you know. So I want to be. You got to spark that curiosity within yourself and be like, I want to know what that means. I want to know what it is. I don't know. Ask. And you might get an answer. You know what I mean? Because as we know how hard it is to become a professional at what we do, that hey, you come humbly and with what you want, we will help.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, it's a little old school, but that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And not everything is taught on YouTube. Like YouTube is not like YouTube is a tool for me to understand other things. But if you have somebody explain that to you, like a mentor, and be like, and then you fact check with them and like that. So it's more of a teaching tool, but it's not the only teacher.
Yeah, there's nothing like having a real mentor.
Yeah.
And originally, flamenco was just passed on orally and through tradition.
Yeah.
It's not like classical music that you could find manuscripts from
Nope.
centuries ago. Or I mean, honestly, transcripts and most of the modern educational methods just started within the last several decades, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
in relationship to how long flamenco has been around, for 500 or plus years. From its origins, we only have stuff documented maybe for the last 40 years,
well,
if that. Yeah.
There is a lot of people studying flamenco history in Spain and have come across written out music from, I don't know, from the Baroque period.
Okay.
But
that I wasn't aware of. Yeah.
Again, we don't we can speculate. You know what I mean? That's what it was. Even though it's they were saying at one point, I was like, no, I mean, I don't think that's that's what it is. But I mean, there is history in Spain that we don't know of.
Okay.
That still hasn't come to light about written music. But think about it, the only people that were really writing music were people with classical training and people with not flamencos. Flamencos wasn't considered at the time a high class music. It was more of a busking. Before it was kind of like you did it in a street corner, and you dance, and then you ask for money. It was very street busking. And until basically what I would say the high class, would walk by and be like, oh, I like what you're doing. Come do it at my house at a party. I have a party. And then the gig classification came along with it. Hey, I have this person for it. Then they would start being well known within the community. Oh, this is the singer, this is the dancer. And little by little, until we got into the Café Cantantes, where, I mean, we're skipping years, which I know, but that didn't become like the tablao, you know what I mean? Like the Café Cantantes became the place where you went to go see the flamenco. You went to go see, like, this is specific,
the jazz.
Yeah, like the jazz club version of flamenco. You go to the flamenco club, which was called at the time Café Cantantes, tablao later, and then after that there was another section.
So the Café Cantantes took it off the streets basically to like the first
kind of, yeah. I mean, within that and the touring companies that wanted variety shows, like espectáculo de variedad and this, and they would tour with that in mind, almost I would say almost like a circus, and they would have the musician, even though it maybe wasn't a circus, but it was a variety show. And then you had after you did the tabla and you had everything, you had a place like you wanted to listen to music, so people that had money, like in Madrid, you had money, you would go and you wanted to make a little more cash, as an artist, you would go to these things called las ventas, and they were these little underground things. It would start around midnight. It was like the after hours. And then people would the musicians would sit around the bar and then you'd have rooms where you'd specifically listen to the artist that you wanted. So you come there and you pick, hey, I love the way you sing. Hey, you guitarist. All right, let's go. And you go and you create this little listening party that you paid for. And for the artist, and then the artist would actually make more. I mean, you would make your extra cash. A lot of singers, a lot of there was no dancing. Well, I mean, it could have been dancing, but it was really more for the musicians. But yeah, I mean, it was dancing sometimes too. But it was specific to that private room, like VIP.
Sure.
And that would go on for all night if they wanted to. I mean, depending on on the artist and on the payment, obviously. So those were other sections that was the underground, I would say, of flamenco. That a lot of people don't just know that it was not just tabla, it was more stuff, obviously, and but yeah, I mean, flamenco to nowadays, to where it is, that I can't almost find any corner around the world that there isn't flamenco. maybe what, Antarctica and North Pole.
Right.
I mean, there's pretty much flamenco everywhere. You know what I mean? It's really hard to say, oh, there isn't. Even if there's one person where you think, especially in the United States, you think, so how big United States is, you think, oh yeah, it has to be some rural country. No, there's someone there that knows or has seen flamenco at some way. So I really like where this is headed, where it's, flamenco is gonna reach. Who knows where it's gonna reach?
Just to take it a step back to the palos and the branches within flamenco. Some people sometimes get confused with flamenco that aren't educated. They're like, oh, is that a Mexican influence? Is that a South American influence? Because sometimes they might hear that in some palos. So for those who don't know, could you just maybe explain the difference between the foundational palos that started in flamenco that are like true to that clash of cultures versus why some people might hear some Caribbean or some influences from other parts in some of the more modern palos?
Well, you're right, because I mean there's a reason for that. I mean, Spain had a lot to do with the colonization, obviously, of all these different countries, and yes, amongst all the bad things that happen, there's also good things. I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm saying some of the stuff that was brought back, we call it cantes de ida y vuelta, are ideas that when they heard these los marineros or the people that were on the boats would bring back. So cantes de ida y vuelta means you go and you come back with an idea and you bring it back, and then they would bring back an idea, and then we'd flamencoize it. I mean, it's a term they want to call flamencoize the song. So then you'd have a derivative of what they heard over there. For example, a guajira from Cuba. We kind of use almost the same. We basically use almost the same lyrics, but we have it in a different measure or different, compás or different time signature. So we have it in a 12. They don't. Then that's so then we do it our own way. And we have milongas, we have vidalitas again from Argentina, or we have all these different styles that can come in from other countries, and we kind of made it our own thing, and then that's why you hear that behind it, you know what I mean? And I would say that, and the ones that got lost, because there was a lot of cantes that came that we don't even it didn't become popular, and then they got lost, and there's so those are a lot of things that now they're discovering, and we're like, oh, what was this cante called again? Like, why isn't this sung anymore? And then so yeah, I mean, there's a reason why. So cante de ida y vuelta, especially like rumbas and all stuff, like those are ideas that we got from the Caribbean and from different countries in South America, Central Mexico. We got ideas too. I mean, it was all a mishmash at one point, and we just kept and the trade, everything. It was stuff that we brought back and converted, and adapted to flamenco.
On that note, with cantes de ida y vuelta, like the rumba, when somebody goes to see, for example, the Gipsy Kings, and they're like, "Oh, I love flamenco. I love the Gypsy Kings." That's the first thing that comes to their mind because that's all they've seen.
Absolutely.
Is it safe to say that they're doing one of the many palos or one of the many versions of flamenco, but it's not truly a all-encompassed flamenco show, obviously. But is it okay to say they're doing a style that I know in the south of France, they also kind of evolved or did their own version.
Absolutely. There were Andalusian families that moved to France.
Yeah.
And did it over there. Just like, we have Andalusian families that moved to New York or wherever,
And,
so it's the same idea, you know what I mean? And again, they come from people that do know the real flamenco, and they do know real flamenco. Like I respect the Gypsy Kings highly, and I think that they did a major help in having flamenco known and recognized amongst the world. Because I mean, you might tell people, "Oh, I do flamenco," and then they look at you like, "Oh, I play." They go stuff like the Gypsy Kings, and people are like, "Oh yeah, And I'm like, oh, you mean Spanish? So that's also a misconception. Obviously, Spanish music. I mean, it is Spanish music, but it's a form of. There are many different styles of music in Spain that is specifically to the south of Spain, But they did a very, 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 very good thing for flamenco, as I would say. Also, again, it could be misconstrued to think that flamenco is just that.
Right.
And that's where we're at in some of the aspects where flamenco, it's just Gypsy Kings, that's flamenco. And then so when you're singing bulería, you're singing soleá, everybody will say like, "What are you doing?" You know, they don't know. But again, like you said, it's ignorant to that specific genre. I mean, you don't know, and they say flamenco. So I mean, I personally don't like the word flamenco being used lightly. I mean, that's my opinion, and I really think that flamenco has a big heaviness to it. To say I'm doing flamenco, well, if you do flamenco, then it comes and says at least a minimum of palos and the minimum of something you have to do that we can relate to us flamenco artists, saying, hey, you're doing tango, bulería, something, soleá, seguirilla,
Right.
alegría, whatever the popular palos that can be played. But when you just do rumba, you're doing flamenco rumba. You're doing a specific one thing. You know what I mean? And hey, if that's popular and that's what people like, I get it. And it's catchy. It's what it has to be. It could be more commercial. I get it, but it doesn't encompass all of flamenco.
Maybe just call it as it is. You're doing
flamenco rumba night or rumba
or
flamenca
rumba
night,
flamenco
whatever.
or
I mean,
flamenco
I
rumba.
totally agree.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to interject with is that's one of the reasons I usually call myself a Spanish guitarist, because I think you can use the word Spanish guitar to encompass a lot of genres under the Spanish guitar, which includes flamenco, Spanish classical. It can include playing different genres, but just using Spanish guitar techniques, flamenco and classical techniques.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But when you use the word flamenco, it's not the same. That's not a generalized term. As you could see, we're speaking about very specific things with flamenco and the art of flamenco. Same thing with the art of just flamenco guitar. So that also can get a little tricky, as I've seen some maybe like a rock artist who puts out an album with a nylon stringed guitar, and
absolutely.
All right, that's the first step. You have a Spanish guitar, but I would say, I mean, at least from my perspective, at least if you're playing at least with flamenco guitar techniques and the sound, and even if you're not playing the style, but you're using the harmonies for your own arrangements, maybe you could delve into that territory. But there's some people who blatantly use a pick, and then they're just not playing with the harmonies of flamenco, not playing with the palos or the rhythm, and then there's basically no reason to call it a flamenco album.
And a lot of chords, a lot of specificity with the chords. So it's not just, playing major or minor. We have a lot of specificity with the sound, a lot of the techniques, like as David would know, you have al sapua, which are, very, very specific to flamenco. Like they're not played in any classical or any other type of music. And, the sounds, the way you resolve, those are different things that aren't usually done in other types of music. So when you do it, I always say there's a thing when you do fusions, or you like doing that type of thing. And to quote a good friend also is, you can do fusions as long as you don't create a confusion, where basically is as long as you know your idiom very well, and then you have someone else that knows idiom very well, and you both are curious and you both study each other's idiom, and then do something very, very connected, then I think you're creating a wonderful fusion to understand that what is, oh wow, like this is what it is. I've done a lot of fusion work myself, and I dive into the other person's world also to understand where I might want to go with it. And that's also the thing. It's not just I'm going to get I want to play Indian music, get a sitar and just start. No, I mean you have to know. You have to know a little bit, and you have to know. And if not, ask. Like I say, asking is kind of like the way to get to Rome, right? That's an old Spanish thing.
I was just talking about that with one of my last guests, El Amir.
Yes, amazing.
El Amir was talking about, I brought up the fact that he played this incredible bulería on the electric guitar, and he had that essence of the bulería. Like, at least personally, I love the flavor that he put into that bulería on an electric. And he was talking about the importance to truly understand each style before you put those together. I mean, he understands what it is to do the rock guitar on his level after a lot of years of mastering, and he's also qualified on the flamenco guitar, and it's not just about just playing however you want.
Exactly.
Another note that Jose was also mentioning, just like you can't call a night of all rumbas like a flamenco show, you best to pretext it and say you're doing a rumba flamenca night. Same thing goes for flamenco guitar. If you're just using some of the flamenco guitar techniques, then maybe best to be a little bit more transparent. Or if you're just playing on a nylon string, best to say Spanish guitar. Just be careful with the term, because you don't want to, because the more you know about flamenco, the more that you want to respect, I think, the art. And I think that's at the point I'm at with it right now. I have a lot of respect for it. It's a lot bigger than I've been able to swallow, and it can take a lifetime to study more than a lifetime.
You don't stop learning. That's
won't
why
stop learning.
you
Yeah.
don't. There's always someday some you look at something. Oh my God, what is that now? Okay, and you just keep going, and that's kind of like the spark behind it to me, especially for me. I've always been a curious person and been like, oh, what? How do you do that? How do you do this? Okay, well, and you look at behind on how to do things, and behind the scenes, how to do it, and it just keeps going. It just keeps going, and and then you add this, you take that out, or and it just doesn't stop. Again, it's a lifestyle. Flamenco is a lifestyle, and that's something that I have to express, that it's not just, it's a way of life, and you live it 24/7.
To leave you guys who didn't have a clear understanding of it before, flamenco isn't just I play flamenco and it's a style of music. Flamenco is an art form. It's even more than an art form. It's a lifestyle. So for some of us, like myself, that were born in the States without a flamenco family or any history with Spanish blood, or just in general, just flamenco in my family, as a foreigner to Spanish culture, I didn't grow up with that culture. So for me, I learned it more like a style, and had to delve into it. Jose, on the other hand, he grew up with it, and it was part of his lifestyle as he was growing up. And when I say you grow up with it, I mean it could be involved in anything from they'll break out in song and dance for any type of celebration.
My dad's always singing. It doesn't matter what.
Dad's always
my
singing.
mom dancing. I'm always singing. My grandmother, rest in peace. She was always singing. I mean, I would to interrupt it, say, like, you think, well, it's Saturday, and I would wake up. You're 6, 7 years old. And what do you want to do as a kid? Watch Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So you turn on your cartoons and you hear in the back, Pepe Pinto, or you have this, and you're like, what's going on? And then my grandma's like blasting these malagueñas, and I would be like, Pepe Marchena, this, and you're like, I want to watch my Spider-Man, but it was a way of life. My mom's cleaning, or my dad was doing something in the house, he was like, help me. And then we'd start, saying, hey, do you know what this is? And this, and this song, we're constantly, that's how it is in the south of Spain as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people that aren't artists, that are basically, you could consider them artists. They sing at home there, but they're not professional artists. Same thing happens to all my family in Malaga. I have singers in my family, but none of them follow the profession, only my dad.
Right.
But they all sing as well. My dad would always tell me, oh, if you heard your uncle, oh my God, he has a better voice than I do. And you listen to my dad, and you're like, man, how's that possible? You're like,
yeah, that's one thing I've noticed when I'm out in Spain, is that somebody's like, oh yeah, I mess around with the guitar a little bit, and the rhythm is the idea that they have is just amazing, and they're not professionals.
Exactly,
that's something people need to understand. I mean, you'll see it in weddings. You'll see people break out in song and dance that are flamenco, and from anything from waiting at the bus stop and doing a little patadita or something.
Exactly. The elevator, especially, you're like,
no,
don't.
One of the reasons I specifically wanted you on this episode was because Jose not only learned flamenco, but he actually grew up in a flamenco family and a flamenco culture, which is a whole different story than from learning it from an outside perspective. Tell us about how you came from a flamenco family, how you're third generation.
Okay, well, I'm third generation, again, meaning that my grandparents were flamenco artists, my parents, and myself. So basically, my grandmother was a very famous flamenco singer, and also canción española, or Spanish song singer. She did a couple tours here in the Americas with Carmen Amaya. So she was singing in the troupe, and when Carmen Amaya back in the 30s and 40s was touring the United States and South America and Central America, and they knew each other. They were friends from Spain, and they family, all of Sabicas also as well, were really good friends of my family, my grandparents, and so then along came my parents, which are both amazing artists in their top flamenco artists in Spain. And my mother's a famous flamenco dancer. She used to be the prima ballerina, or primera bailadora, of Antonio el Bailarín, which was a a pretty big deal because there wasn't a National Ballet of Spain at that time in 1969 through 1971. So he was the acting like representative of Spain as
Sure.
the national like ballet. So it was Antonio y su Ballet de Madrid. And my father was a famous flamenco singer. He sang with all the greats. I mean, including Paco de Lucia and Paco Cepero, Manolo Sanlúcar. He sang with all these legends. Both my parents were active performers in the Madrid flamenco tablao scene back in the 60s and 70s and the early 80s. But they came to New York in 1975. They came on a contract, kind of annual contracts where they paid a lot of money, and then they decided to stay after every year, saying, "Oh, let's renew the contract. Let's renew the contract." There was a lot more money to make here in the United States back then than in Spain. And then I was born here in the United States, and then basically back and forth from Spain here. My parents decided to really stay here, and then we moved to the state of Florida, or Miami specifically, and I grew up there, where my mom did a flamenco studio that we had open for 30 years, and that's where I came along. Started training and dancing when I was 5. My mom gave me my first lessons. I did my first sevillanas, did my first, alegrias when I was like 6, and kind of started blossoming from there, learning percussion, cajon. So I kind of grew one and one together.
Yeah, the interesting
Yeah.
thing about Jose is that he's a quadruple threat. He started off with the dance, and then got into the percussion, then also started singing as well. And if that wasn't bad enough, he also plays guitar. So,
Yeah. I guess I was a very active child.
yeah.
But basically, I started grabbing the guitar. I remember I started this tour back when I was 19, and I started putzing around the guitar because I got pretty annoyed that all the singers and guitarists would leave after juerga, like after work. I wanted juerga, I wanted a party, and everybody would just leave and go home. And I'm like, what the heck, man? Like where's the juerga that everybody tells me about? And then so I decided to start the juergas and kind of singing very badly in this. And then my dad's like, well, you want to sing, you gotta study in this. And you're listening to your whole life. And same thing with the guitar. I've been looking at guitarists my whole life, listening. So it's now a matter of, I know the rhythms, I know the structures, but now you got to build your techniques. So little by little, yeah, I grabbed the guitar when I was 19. Well, actually, yeah, like 18 and a half, 19. And same thing with singing around the same time, and started developing that. And then back in 2008, I moved to New York to, kind of use that as a stepping stone to Spain, working with a lot of artists, working this, and ended up going to Madrid a couple times and came back and, performed here and there. Did a show, a TV show out in Sevilla. I was there for 3 months, worked and danced and did all this stuff. It was just an amazing experience. But basically, it's we're going to dive into it a little bit more, but being a flamenco or living that is my life. Like that's what I do 24/7. And just there's so many things to learn, so many things to continue learning. You never stop learning. And it's every time I have a saying, or I heard a saying, because now it's my saying, the more you know, the more you know that you don't know.
Yeah.
So you're like, the more you know you're like, man, like there's still more to learn.
So yeah, I think that's a great final thought to leave this on. Unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
The other thing I'd like to add is, if you are studying or learning flamenco, or just want to be a flamenco, just live it. Live it for real. Let that soak in. And I've been part of a studio where my mom had it for 30 years. We've seen people come and go, they leave it and then come back, 15 years later, and you're like, hey, they're grown up, have families, and you're like, you're back, and they're like, yeah, I don't know what it is, And I mean, once the flamenco bug bites you, it's there for life,
Right.
So I mean, I would say it's a steady heart. Really, really, it's such a rich culture and such a informative. That right now, with all the mixes that's in it, there's so much information and so much to look up, that for me, it's exciting. It's something that you're like, well, where's this going to go next? I mean, I can agree with some of the changes, I cannot, but to me, either way, those changes is part of growth. And I really like where this is going, that flamenco for me, since it's my way of life and what I feel day to day, 24/7, since I wake up till I fall asleep, own it and have it with you if you're going to do this, and do it for real. Don't fake it. You know?
And if you're like myself that didn't grow up with Spanish culture or flamenco culture, then I think the best place to start is just listening to a variety, starting with some older flamenco, more straightforward traditional
Absolutely.
flamenco, moving up to the modern as well. But it's always a nice start to go back as far back as you want to go back to see how it was done traditionally. Just listen, because it's hard to learn something that you haven't heard and just try to learn it right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, one of the best ways to learn is with immersion, just going down there, immersing yourself into the culture, being around the cities and everything while you're learning. But nowadays, you have the advantage of learning online or YouTube. And on a final note, if anybody would like some private instruction from this maestro, he is available as well for private instruction, and I'll definitely list his links in the description for you to check him out online. Follow him on social media, or if you'd like a little coaching or mentoring session with him, he's a phenomenal coach.
Oh, thank you. Jose Moreno Flamenco.com or Jose Moreno Flamenco Insta, anything. Everything is Jose Moreno Flamenco.
Besides that, you can catch him touring around with several dance companies and flamenco companies through the States or internationally as well. This episode was actually recorded on location in Hamilton, New York. We're down here at the Colgate University to do a few lecture demos and a couple performances down in the city. So it's been great hanging around with this guy and performing with him, an honor. I'm always learning from him, and he's always pushing me as well.
We learn from everybody, right? So, I learn too.
So I hope you guys are leaving this with a better understanding of flamenco, the art of flamenco, and what it exactly is. Catch you in the next episode. Thank you, Jose.
Ole, vamos allá.
Oh, I forgot to hit record.